My name is Alara Whitman, and the night of my sister's birthday gala was the moment I stopped pretending I belonged in a family that never wanted me to shine. It started with an invitation, gold embossed, sealed in a crimson envelope, and hand-delivered. By a courier like it was some royal summons. You are cordially invited to celebrate Aurora Whitman's 30th birthday gala at the Lexington estate. The wording was elegant, formal, almost clinical. No, we can't wait to see you. No, so glad you'll be there. Just an obligation wrapped in glitter. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if I should even go. But some quiet, foolish hope whispered, maybe this time will be different. I should have known better. For context, Aurora and I are twins. Not just sisters, twins. We were born minutes apart but have lived worlds apart. She's the diamond. The pride, the one my parents call our golden girl. I'm the shadow, the forgotten one. Growing up, she got the piano lessons, the modeling contracts, the birthday parties that made it to the society page. I got library cards and hand-me-downs. My mother once told me, without irony, that I was lucky I didn't have to deal with all the attention Aurora did. It's a blessing, really, to be overlooked sometimes, she said, while pinning yet another award on Aurora's shelf. I stopped asking for birthday cakes after I turned 12. Still, I went to the gala. I dressed. In a silk navy gown I bought secondhand and altered myself. I even styled my hair in the same soft waves Aurora always wore, hoping, stupidly, that this time they'd see me as part of the family. That maybe, just once, someone would say, "We're so glad you're here." I arrived alone, stepping out of my rideshare in front of the Lexington estate, a towering mansion lit like a movie set. Paparazzi milled outside. Aurora had apparently hired a press team to document the night. Guests were escorted up a marble staircase into a massive courtyard, twinkling with fairy lights. Classical music floated through the air. Waiters in white. Gloves offered trays of champagne and caviar. It was decadent, theatrical, exactly like Aurora. As I reached the check-in booth, the coordinator gave me a strained smile. Name? Alara Whitman. Her eyes flicked to the list. She froze. Oh, she said. One word, flat. Uncomfortable. What? I asked, already knowing the answer. You've been assigned to the catering tent. I blinked. Sorry? That must be a mistake. I'm her sister. The woman's expression didn't change. It's what we were told. She handed me a wristband. Not the black silk band most guests wore. This one was bright red and said, "Staff access only." I felt my stomach drop. You're seating me with the staff? The catering tent has lounge seating. It's very comfortable. I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. She requested it personally, the woman added quietly, before glancing away. I'm sorry. The noise of laughter and music grew louder around me, but it sounded far away. I stood there, frozen, the red wristband clenched in my fist. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. I took a breath, then another. I should have turned around. I should have walked away right then and spared myself the humiliation. But instead, I let some ridiculous sense of duty guide me toward the catering tent. Maybe I wanted to see just how low they were willing to go. The tent was tucked behind the estate, near the loading docks. It was brightly lit, filled with catering staff prepping plates of hors d'oeuvres and bussers on their breaks. There was a small table near the back labeled Overflow. One chair, one glass of water, one place card with my name spelled wrong. Elena. I sat down, and then I cried. Not loud, not messy, just a few silent tears slipping down my face while no one looked. No one noticed. No one ever did. I stayed there for 20 minutes, just long. Enough for the numbness to settle in. I watched as course after course of gourmet food was prepped and carried away toward a party I wasn't invited to. I thought about the time Aurora locked me in our bathroom during our 8th birthday so she could have all the guests to herself. I thought about how my mother told me to just be the bigger person when Aurora took credit for the science project I'd built. I thought about every time I let it slide, let her win, let her push me aside because I thought somehow that was what sisters were supposed to do. And then something changed. A commotion stirred near the back entrance of the estate. 2 servers rushed out murmuring about the video. I perked up. One of them was holding a phone, his face pale. "They're gonna freak," he said. "She's done." I stood and walked toward them. "What video?" He hesitated. It's of Aurora." He handed me the phone. The screen showed Aurora in a dressing room, clearly unaware she was being filmed. She was on the phone, her voice sharp, unmistakable. "I don't care if Alara shows up, just make sure she's not anywhere near the main event. She ruins everything. She's like a stain on the carpet, won't go away, but you can't look at it either. Just put her somewhere out of sight, somewhere pathetic, like with the staff or something." My blood ran cold. The video was time-stamped 2 days ago. My breath hitched. The staffer took the phone back, still stunned. "Someone leaked it to the press. It's already online." The world shifted beneath me, and I smiled, not out of joy. Not out of revenge, out of clarity, because at that moment I knew Aurora wasn't untouchable anymore, and for once, I had the truth on my side. If you're still with me, buckle up. Because what happened next turned an act of humiliation into a reckoning none of them saw coming. And you'll want to see how it ends. I stood outside the catering tent gripping the truth like a live wire, my pulse pounding in my ears. The words from that video echoed through my mind, a stain on the carpet, as if I were nothing more than a blemish on her curated life. I could have stayed hidden, humiliated, and small. That's what Aurora had always counted on. My silence. My reluctance to cause a scene. But something in me cracked that night. Something years in the making. I didn't storm in, not yet. I wanted her to feel it the way I had all these years. Not with chaos, but with precision. The same kind of quiet, disregard she'd perfected, the kind that cuts deeper than any screaming match ever could. So instead, I walked to the edge of the estate, just far enough to get service, and opened my social media. The video was already circulating. A popular entertainment page had posted it with the caption, "Is this how you treat family?" Hundreds of comments poured in. Strangers outraged, fans stunned. A few people calling her out by name. It hadn't exploded yet, but it was simmering. I just had to stir the pot. I took a deep breath and opened my own account. I rarely posted, but that night I had something to say. I uploaded a photo of the catering tent, followed by a short clip of my place card sitting on the folding table, Ilana, written in cursive. Then, the caption, "When you're invited to your twin sister's gala but seated with the staff so you don't ruin the vibe." And then you find this video. "Happy birthday, Aurora. I hope it was worth it." I hit post. Within minutes, my phone buzzed violently. Likes, shares, comments, texts, a wave building and building. I watched it in real time, the slow unraveling of her perfect image. I wasn't some anonymous outsider anymore. I was her twin sister. And the world had just seen what she really thought of me. Inside the tent, one of the servers turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I will be." Moments later, a woman in a headset came rushing toward us, her expression panicked. "Where is she?" she barked. "Where is Alara Whitman?" I stepped forward calmly. "That would be me." She blinked, clearly thrown by how composed I was. You need to come with me. Now." "Why?" I asked, tilting my head. Did my sister suddenly remember I exist? Her face flushed. There's been an incident. We're trying to do damage control. I'm sure you are, I said. But still, I followed. We moved through the back corridors of the estate, the sounds of the gala now slightly different. Not just laughter and clinking glasses, but whispers. People had seen the video. I could feel it in the air, the shift, the unease. I was no longer invisible. I was the problem they hadn't planned for. The coordinator ushered me through the side entrance of the ballroom. Heads turned as I stepped inside. There was a ripple, a hush that followed me like a shadow. I held my head high. Not because I felt confident, but because I was done shrinking. At the center of the room, under a massive crystal chandelier, stood Aurora. She wore a champagne-colored gown that hugged her like it had been stitched from ego and entitlement. And for the first time in my life, she didn't look untouchable. She looked cornered. "Alara," she said, her voice taut. "Can I speak with you, privately?" I smiled, sweet and razor-sharp. "Oh, I think we're well past private." A few gasps floated through the room. Aurora stiffened. "You've made your point," she hissed through gritted teeth. "But you need to take that post down." "Do I?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand what this is doing to me. Sponsors are calling. PR is blowing up. You're ruining everything I've worked for." My laugh was quiet and joyless. "You mean everything you built on lies?" "Alara, be serious. You know how this world works. You think anyone cares about your sob story? About a seating arrangement? They'll forget in a week, but I won't." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for me." Her face twisted. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I replied, "but it makes me free." Before she could respond, our mother appeared, her face tight with worry. "What is going on?" Vivian demanded. "Ilara, what did you do?" "I told the truth," I said simply. "The truth?" My mother scoffed. "You embarrassed your sister in front of the entire city. You humiliated this family." "No," I said, my voice low but clear. "You did that when you told people I was only invited out of obligation. You did that when you allowed her to shove me in a catering tent like I was some problem to hide." My father had joined by then, silent as always. But for once, his eyes looked unsure. Vivian reached for me, her tone suddenly soft. "Darling, don't make this worse than it has to be." And there it was. The line they always used when they didn't want to take responsibility. I stepped back. It's not my job to fix this anymore. The tension broke with the arrival of someone unexpected. The estate owner, an elderly woman in an elegant suit with silver hair pulled into a sleek bun. She walked straight to Aurora, phone in hand. "Ms. Whitman," she said coldly, "I think it's best we end the event early. Your behavior reflects poorly on our brand. We're shutting it down." Aurora's face turned sheet white. "You can't do that. You paid for a celebration, not a scandal," the woman cut in. "Our reputation is worth more than your check." The lights dimmed. The music stopped. One by one, guests began to leave. Aurora stood frozen, jaw clenched, eyes burning into me. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." As I walked out of the ballroom, dozens of eyes followed me, but none with pity. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten sister. I was the one who told the truth and didn't look away. I didn't sleep that night. After walking out of the Whitman estate, alone but not defeated, I found myself back in my tiny apartment, still wearing my gown, makeup smudged from hours of holding in tears, and then letting them fall, freely, under the cover of night. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers, DMs from influencers, reposts, reaction videos. I had gone viral. My face, my voice, my truth. It had exploded across platforms, and for once, the world wasn't siding with Aurora, but it didn't feel like a win. Not yet, because the real battle hadn't even started. At 2:13 a.m., a call came in from an unknown number. I let it ring. Again at 2:14, then 2:16. I finally answered, expecting my mother, or perhaps Aurora herself, desperate to salvage whatever scraps of her image still remained. It wasn't either of them. Ilara? The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, and unfamiliar. My name is Camille. I work in brand relations for House Rylane. I believe you've heard of us? I blinked. House Rylane, Aurora's biggest sponsor. The luxury fashion house that practically built her public persona. Yes, I said slowly. We've reviewed your post. And the footage. A long pause. We'd like to meet. The next morning, I walked into a downtown Chicago office suite that looked like a glass palace. Camille met me at the elevator, perfectly tailored in a gray pantsuit and heels that echoed purpose with every step. We're aware of the seating incident, she said, skipping pleasantries. But what concerns us more is the audio. You mean her calling me a stain on the carpet? I said, my voice hollow. She gave a curt nod. Exactly. That, and the part where she said she'd never have invited you if our PR team didn't insist on the family unity angle. My stomach turned. That hadn't been on the video I'd seen. You've heard more, I whispered. We have, she confirmed. One of our stylists was recording behind the scenes. They sent it to us the moment the video blew up. Aurora didn't know the mic was live. I felt a jolt of something between disgust and vindication. Camille continued. We are terminating her partnership effective immediately. I stared at her. Just like that? Camille's mouth curled, but not in a smile. We built her. We can unbuild her. She handed me a folder. Inside, press release drafts, timelines, strategy notes. But before we do, she said, we have a proposition. You. I blinked. Me? She nodded. You're articulate, authentic. You don't try to be perfect. That matters now, especially when perfection's a lie. You want to sponsor me? I said, half laughing. We want to invest in the truth. She corrected. Aurora used her platform to sell a fantasy. We believe you can sell something better, reality. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent years living in her shadow, and now, just like that, they were handing me her spotlight. Camille leaned in, voice low. Think about it, Ilara. For once, tell your own story. Not as her twin. Not as the forgotten one. Just as you. I left the building with the city spinning around me. The offer burned in my bag like a secret. Part of me was terrified. The other part? Electrified. But just as quickly as opportunity had knocked, the past came crashing back through my phone. Aurora. Her name lit up my screen with a call I didn't plan to answer. But I did. Ilara. Her voice was hoarse. She sounded like she hadn't slept. I need to talk to you, in person, please. I almost hung up. I have nothing to say to you. I know, she said quickly. But I have something to say. Something important. Said nothing. There's something you don't know about that night, she added. Something Dad said, something I wasn't supposed to hear. And just like that, the ground shifted again, because Dad had died 2 years ago, and Aurora never brought him up. Not ever. I agreed to meet her. One last time. We sat at a small cafe on the edge of Lincoln Park, far from the cameras, far from the whispers. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie pulled low, unrecognizable to the world that once adored her. She looked at me like she hadn't in years. I didn't plan to seat you in the tent, she said. I blinked. You told the planner I was a stain. Did, she admitted. But not about you. Not exactly. I froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out a phone. Her hand trembled as she opened the voice memo app. It's a conversation from the week before the gala, she said. Between Mom and Dad. I overheard it. I didn't mean to record it. It was an accident. I forgot I'd hit record during a walk. But I kept it. She pressed play. My father's voice came first. Older, wearier than I remembered. Viv, don't push her into this party. Alara doesn't belong in that crowd. You know it. She's our daughter, my mother replied sharply. She's a liability, Dad snapped. She never plays the role, and Aurora's worked too hard for us to let Alara ruin it. You want the money? The prestige? Keep Alara quiet. Put her out of sight. I sat there stunned. Every breath felt like glass. Aurora hit pause. I found it the morning of the gala, she said. I was already angry at you for, well, everything. So I didn't say anything. But hearing it again last night, after everything, I realized we were both used. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. I didn't protect you, Alara. I became the very thing I promised I'd never be. I'm sorry. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw that phone into the lake. But I just sat there. Everything made sense. Now, not just the tent, the years, the coldness. I wasn't just forgotten, I was hidden. My father's final wish was for me to stay invisible. Aurora wiped her face. They built me up by tearing you down, and I let them. I nodded slowly, the silence between us heavy with truth. But truth, no matter how late, is still truth. I stood. I'm not staying invisible anymore. Aurora looked up. I hope you don't. And as I walked away, I knew it wasn't over. Not the fallout, not the reckoning. That would come next. I didn't expect the letter. Not after everything. Not after the viral video, the fallout, and the meeting with Aurora. But 2 days after our talk it came. Thick ivory cardstock, my name handwritten in calligraphy across the front. No return address, no logo, just one word inside. Inheritance. Underneath, a date, a time, a location. The Whitman family attorney's office. My pulse quickened. My father had passed nearly 2 years ago, and as far as I knew, the will had been settled, the assets divided. Aurora got the estate, my mother got the accounts, and I was the forgotten footnote. But this hinted at something left unfinished. At first, I thought it might be a ploy, a distraction, maybe even a trap. But curiosity mixed with a strange sense of dread made it impossible to ignore. I showed up 10 minutes early. The office was nothing like I expected, sleek, minimalist, cold. The receptionist barely glanced at me before gesturing toward a conference room at the end of the hall. When I entered, 2 people were already waiting, my mother and Aurora. Aurora looked different. No makeup, no entourage. Just her in a simple black sweater, hair pulled back like it used to be before all the fame. She offered a small nod. My mother, however, didn't even try to hide her disdain. You really came, she said, arms crossed, mouth tight. I was invited, I replied calmly. Invited out of obligation, she snapped. Don't mistake formality for sentiment. Before I could respond, the door opened and in walked Harold McTavish, our family's attorney for over 20 years. A man so methodical he once had my father reschedule a heart surgery to ensure his signature was on a land transfer before anesthesia. Ladies, he said without expression, placing a leather briefcase on the table. Thank you for coming. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick and sealed with a red wax stamp. My breath hitched. Something about that seal, something final, made my chest tighten. "This," he began, "is an addendum. A final letter from your father, written 4 days before his death. It was to be opened only if specific conditions were met. Conditions which, as of last week, were satisfied." My mother straightened in her chair, her lips parting slightly. "What conditions?" Harold glanced at me. "Public disgrace within the family, specifically involving Aurora." The room froze. "I'm sorry," he continued, "but when Ms. Alara's video went viral and your brand contracts were terminated, the clause activated." Aurora blinked. "He predicted this?" "Not this exactly," Harold replied, "but he had concerns." He broke the seal and unfolded the document. The rustle of paper was the only sound in the room. "My daughters," he began reading, voice steady. "If you are hearing this, it means the house I built has crumbled in public view, and perhaps, finally, it is time to acknowledge what I never could face while I was alive." Silence thickened like fog. "I failed you both," Harold continued. "In different ways. Aurora, I crafted you into an image. I gave you everything, but only because I thought you could carry the Whitman name into the spotlight. But I never asked what it would cost you, or who you'd become." Aurora looked away. "Alara," he read, and my stomach flipped. "I buried you, not out of hate, but out of fear. You reminded me of your grandmother, strong-willed, too honest. She burned every bridge in the name of truth, and I never forgave her for it." I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling. "You deserved better," the letter went on. "And while I cannot rewrite the past, I can attempt to balance the scales now." Harold paused, then slid a second envelope across the table, this one addressed, "To me. Alara is to receive full ownership of the Whitman Foundation," he said, "as well as 60% of its remaining assets. Effective immediately." My mother gasped. Aurora's eyes snapped to Harold. "That's not possible. The foundation's part of my—" "No longer," he interrupted. "Your father had me restructure it last year, quietly, legally." My heart thudded in my chest. The Whitman Foundation was our family's philanthropic legacy, prestigious, powerful, deeply tied to every social circle in the city. It was Aurora's platform, her halo, and now it was mine. "I don't believe this," my mother hissed. "This is a punishment." "No," Harold replied. "This is accountability." Aurora said nothing. She just stared at the envelope in my hands, her jaw tight, the color draining from her face. "I'm not doing this to spite you," Harold said softly. "Your father. He just wanted to give Alara a voice, one you both spent years silencing. For the first time, I saw fear in Aurora's eyes, not the fear of being canceled, not the fear of bad press, real fear, of being irrelevant, of losing the very thing she used to keep me beneath her heel." I took the envelope and stood, unsure what to say. As I turned to leave, my mother rose. "This is a mistake, Alara. You think you're ready for this? You're not. You'll ruin everything." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll build something real, something that doesn't need to humiliate someone to shine." Aurora didn't speak. She didn't have to. I could see it written all over her. This wasn't over, and she wasn't done. But neither was I. Because now, for the first time in my life, the power was in my hands. And what I did with it would determine whether this story ended in more destruction or became the beginning of something none of us saw coming. The door to the attorney's office hadn't even closed behind me before my phone exploded with notifications. Texts from numbers I hadn't seen in years, Instagram DMs, even a missed call from a board member I once idolized. Word spread fast in our world. Aurora Whitman had just lost the crown jewel of her empire, and I had just inherited the one thing she never wanted me to touch: power. I should have felt triumphant, should have felt like the sister shoved into shadows had finally stepped into the light. But standing alone on the city sidewalk, clutching the envelope that now represented everything I had been denied for years, all I felt was quiet. Not peace, not revenge, just silence. It's strange how gaining everything you were once denied doesn't erase the years you spent pretending it didn't matter. I went straight to the Foundation's headquarters that afternoon. It felt surreal, walking into the same building I had only entered as Aurora's forgotten sibling, the one security barely glanced at, the one who wasn't on the guest list. But this time, the woman at the front desk stood when she saw me. Alara. "Whitman," she asked. "We've been expecting you." The office hadn't changed. Still glass walls and minimalist art. Still the signature scent Aurora had bottled with a luxury brand to infuse into every floor. But something was different. Now, the eyes that followed me weren't dismissive. They were alert, curious, watching. The interim director, a sharp-featured woman named Melissa, greeted me outside the executive boardroom. "We weren't sure you'd come today," she said, smoothing her skirt. "But we're glad you did. Are you?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "Your father always said you had a backbone. I think we're about to find out if he was right." Inside the boardroom, the room was full. 12 members sat in sleek leather chairs, all of them once handpicked by my father and later puppeted by Aurora. And now here they were, waiting for the girl they never expected to see again. I stepped to the front of the room, heart pounding. I hadn't come to prove anything. But I needed them to understand that I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a figurehead, to be quietly nudged out in 6 months. I was here because this foundation had meant something to my father, something beyond press coverage and gala invitations. It had been the only part of his empire he had built with genuine intent. So I told them the truth. "My name is Alara Whitman," I began. "And for most of my life, this family treated me like a liability. Too quiet, too different, too unmarketable. But I was watching, and I saw what you turned this place into." A few board members shifted in their seats. The Whitman Foundation was supposed to be about legacy, not leverage. And I know the temptation to continue down the same path, the one Aurora paved with press kits and strategic philanthropy. But we're not doing that anymore. Someone tried to interrupt. I didn't stop. We're going back to what this was, meant to be. Real impact, real community work. No more $50,000 luncheons to raise $10,000 in grants. No more performative charity. We're burning the script, and we're writing something better. The silence was immediate. And then, a single nod. Then 2. Then a voice from the back. "What's your first move?" I exhaled, steadying myself. "We open the books, every dollar, every deal, and we find out where the rot is." Later that evening, I sat alone in my new office. Aurora's nameplate was gone. Mine hadn't arrived yet. The emptiness was symbolic. I opened the envelope Harold had handed me. Inside wasn't just a legal document, it was a handwritten letter. From my father. Alara. If you're reading this, then the truth has already started to surface. And I'm sorry. For every moment I looked away when I should have defended you, for every silence that screamed louder than words. You weren't invisible. You were my conscience. And I was too proud to face what I'd done to you. This foundation, this one thing, I leave in your hands not because I believe you'll follow in my footsteps, but because I believe you'll surpass them. Lead it your way. Make it matter again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll finally forgive me. I folded the letter slowly, my throat tight. I didn't cry. I didn't break. But for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I wasn't crazy for remembering things differently. Maybe I wasn't wrong for wanting more than crumbs. But the day wasn't done. At 9:17 p.m., I received a message that shifted everything again. Aurora. She hadn't said a word since the attorney's office, but now, one text, just 4 words. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether to reply, but I knew her. She wasn't done, not even close. So I typed back, tomorrow, noon, my office. She would come. She always had to control the narrative, but this time, she'd be walking into my space. And what she didn't know was that by then, I would have something she wasn't expecting. A piece of leverage so explosive it could either rebuild the relationship we never had, or end whatever fragile illusion remained. The next morning, the city felt colder than usual. Not the weather, just the air around me. Like something was shifting, like something was coming. I arrived at the foundation early, unlocking the door, myself, the echo of my heels on the marble floor the only sound greeting me. The silence was sharp, charged. Today would change everything again. And I knew it. By noon, my office was prepared. I didn't ask for coffee. I didn't set out water. This wasn't a social call. I'd had a copy of the foundation's financial audit printed, the results from a firm I quietly hired 2 weeks before the gala. The thick manila folder sat in the center of my desk, weighted down by the truth I'd been waiting to drop. And right next to it, I placed something else, an envelope containing records I hadn't expected to find. At exactly 12:02, Aurora arrived. She entered like nothing had happened, her posture perfect, her coat draped over one arm, hair pulled. Back in the way she always wore it when she was playing the composed savior. But I saw the tension in her jaw, the twitch in her eye. Her armor was cracking. She just didn't know how to admit it yet. "Alara," she said, as though we were sisters again. "I thought maybe we could have a real conversation now that emotions have cooled." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." She did, slowly. For a moment, we just stared at each other. 2 women raised in the same house, told the same bedtime stories, but handed 2 very different roles in the family drama. "I didn't come to fight," she began. "You didn't come to apologize either," I replied. Her mouth tightened. "There are things you don't understand." "Then explain." She hesitated, choosing her words like they were sharp glass. "Dad wasn't perfect. We both know that. He made promises to everyone. You, me, half this board. And in the end, someone was going to be disappointed." "He didn't promise me anything," I said, voice low. "He promised himself something. That this foundation would do real work. You turned it into your personal PR machine." "I built its visibility," she snapped. "Without me, no one would have cared about this place." "But they would have respected it," I said. "Instead of questioning every grant, every check, every fabricated number in those quarterly reports." Her face froze. And that's when I knew. She'd seen the audit results. "Careful, Alara," she said. "You're walking a very fine line. Defamation isn't something you want on your record." I opened the folder slowly, the one sitting, like a loaded weapon between us. "It's only defamation if it isn't true." Her eyes flicked to the pages, then back to me. She didn't reach for them. That silence told me everything. I traced nearly $1.2 million over 3 years to shell organizations, I said evenly. Organizations that don't exist beyond a website and a P.O. box. And guess who signed off on every transfer? Her hand stayed perfectly still, but I could feel the fury vibrating off her body. "You think the board will believe you?" she asked. "You think they'll side with you over me?" "They already have," I said, sliding the second envelope forward. This was anonymously submitted to my private inbox, but I know exactly who sent it. It's a full timeline, emails, voice memos, payment authorizations, all of it tied back to your executive assistant, Funny how people turn on you when they realize your loyalty has an expiration date. She went pale. You stole from the foundation. You used your name, your title, your press charm to funnel money into dead accounts. I thought maybe it was to prop up your lifestyle. But no, it was worse. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to deny it, but couldn't. So I gave her the final piece. You were preparing to launch a private consulting firm, Whitman Impact Strategies, using our donor list, our contacts. You weren't just laundering money, Aurora. You were building an empire with bricks stolen from our father's grave. Her voice was barely a whisper. You don't understand what it's like to always be watched, to always be expected to succeed. My heart almost broke for her, almost, because I had lived a different pain of being invisible, of being underestimated. She had been under pressure, yes, but I had been erased. You're right, I said. I don't understand what it's like to be watched, because I was never allowed to be seen. Aurora looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. Regret, shame, not enough to undo the damage, but just enough to know that somewhere inside her, a younger version of my sister still existed. What do you want? She asked, voice ragged. I paused, then gave her the only mercy she didn't expect. I won't press charges, I said. But you're going to resign, publicly, and you're going to say it's for health reasons, or personal growth, or whatever polished lie you prefer. You will not mention me. You will not play victim. And if I hear even a whisper that you've tried to spin this in the press, I'll make sure your next home has bars. She stared at me, the fall finally sinking in. Not a stumble, not a PR problem, but a true, irreversible fall. And after that? She asked. You leave, I said. Not just the foundation, the city, the spotlight. You disappear, Aurora, like you always wished I would. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own breath. After a long, shuddering pause, she nodded once. No fight left. No venom. Just surrender. She stood, slowly. Her fingers trembled as she gathered her purse. As she walked to the door, I said one final thing. You were given everything, but it was never enough for you. I was given nothing, and I built something anyway. That's the difference between us. She didn't look back. The news broke before I even stepped foot back into the office. It hit every inbox across the foundation, an all-staff email titled Leadership Transition. No drama, no scandal. Just 2 sanitized paragraphs announcing Aurora Whitman's resignation due to personal health priorities and a desire to pursue new opportunities outside the organization. Her signature was there, detached and polished, like she had written it wearing pearls and drinking matcha on a balcony far removed from the mess she left behind. But I knew better. The board convened that same afternoon, their faces stiff behind glass conference room walls. I wasn't officially called in, but they all knew who had orchestrated this shift, who had pulled the rot from the roots. I passed by the room once on my way to grab my files and caught sight of Marcus Lane, the board chair, leaning forward, with his hands steepled, nodding as someone read aloud. The words were muffled. The tone was not. Serious, grim, and just a little odd. By sunset, the whispers started. They didn't ask what I did. They asked how. Internally, everyone assumed I had help, that no one could dismantle Aurora Whitman alone, that there had to be a lawyer or a leak, or maybe some anonymous tipster with a grudge and a USB drive. But no one knew it was all me. Just me, the girl who'd been sent to the catering tent, the sister they forgot, and maybe that was what made it feel even more unreal. That night, I walked the halls of the foundation alone. The lights were dim. The portraits of past directors cast long shadows. I paused by my father's, the oil painting that always seemed too regal, too removed from the man I remembered laughing over burnt toast on Sunday mornings. For a moment, I wondered what he would say if he saw all of this. If he'd be proud, or just heartbroken. "Was this what you wanted?" I whispered to no one. Or did we all just lose ourselves trying to protect something that stopped being real a long time ago? I thought of Aurora then, not the woman in the boardroom, but the girl who used to sneak me slices of cake when I was grounded. The one who used to braid my hair before recitals, who once promised me that we'd always be on the same team. That girl had died somewhere along the way, replaced by a woman addicted to power and performance. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't even realize it until the spotlight burned her down to bone. The next morning, a brown envelope landed on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single note written in familiar looping cursive. For what? It's worth, "I did love you once." I just forgot how to show it. No signature. No apology. But it was the closest Aurora would ever come. I held the note between my fingers for a long time. There were no tears, no rage. Just a strange, hollow ache. A grief not for what was, but for what never got to be. A version of us that didn't survive ambition and resentment and silence. I tucked the note away in a drawer, because now, the work was just beginning. By the end of the week, the board asked to meet privately with me. This time, it wasn't to question, it was to offer. They wanted me to step in, not just as interim director, but as permanent leadership. They cited my integrity, my vision, the fact that I had proven myself not in press releases or gala speeches, but in grit and action when it mattered most. Didn't say yes right away. Instead, I walked the foundation's community center, the one my father built with his bare hands and the sweat of volunteers who believed in something bigger than themselves. I visited the food pantry, the after-school tutoring room where kids scribbled equations on whiteboards and forgot the weight of the world outside. The dance studio where laughter echoed louder than music. I saw why he fought so hard to protect this place, and I saw why I had to fight too. When I returned to the boardroom, I said yes, but with conditions, real changes. No more political donors dictating programming, full financial transparency. A rotating leadership mentorship program that brought up young, diverse voices from within. They agreed, because after everything, they finally realized what leadership actually looks like. Not polished, not rehearsed, just true. On my first official day as executive director, I wore the same navy dress I wore to Aurora's gala. The one she shoved me out of. The one I stood in alone beneath a tent, questioning if I mattered at all. I wore it not to be petty, but as a reminder. That strength doesn't come from invitations. It comes from what you do after they lock you out. That evening, I stood before our full staff. Some I had worked alongside for years, others who barely knew my name. I didn't give a speech about my title. I talked about my father, about the mistakes we all made chasing legacy instead of purpose, about how, starting today, things would be different. No more pedestals, no more performances. Just people, building something honest, brick by brick. Afterwards, a young intern approached me. Nervous. Shy. "You said something that really stuck with me," she whispered. "That you don't need to be chosen to make a difference. That you can just choose yourself." I smiled, feeling the full weight of those words land somewhere deep in my chest. She chose herself. So did I. The air felt different the morning I unlocked the doors to my new office. Not because the walls had changed or the windows let in more light, but because this time, I was walking into it with the full weight and clarity of everything I had endured. The betrayal, the erasure, the humiliation of being sent to the catering tent like an afterthought, all the silence I swallowed while pretending it didn't matter. It mattered. It always mattered. But now, I wasn't walking and carrying resentment. I was carrying purpose. The foundation was no longer Aurora's empire, no longer a polished playground for her status games. The people here weren't pawns in her version of legacy. They were part of something real, and I finally had the power to protect that. In my first full month, we hosted an open house, not for donors, not for press, but for the community. The real ones. The single moms using our childcare services. The teenagers applying for scholarships they never thought they'd get. The former volunteers who had left quietly when they realized the mission no longer spoke to them. They returned that day. I saw them come in hesitant, some of them still bruised by the memory of being invisible. But they stayed, they talked, and when I spoke, they listened. Not because of my title, but because I told the truth. I told them I wasn't always seen either. That the organization they now stood in had once pushed even its own family out when it no longer served their image. But I also told them that's not how we would move forward. That this building would never again forget the very people it was built for. One of the most powerful moments happened during a Q&A. A woman in the back, gray streaks in her braid, calloused hands from years of factory work, asked me plainly, "Why did you stay when they made it so clear they didn't want you?" I paused before answering. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the truth took time to settle into my bones. I stayed, I said, because I knew what they didn't. That I didn't need their permission to make change. I only needed the courage to claim it. There was a stillness after that. Not applause, not fanfare. Just a quiet, collective recognition that something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in all of us. That night, when the staff had gone home and the lights were dimmed, I stayed behind. I wandered the halls with no shoes on, heels abandoned at my desk, dress sleeves rolled up. I paused in the quietest corner of the building, where the catering tent had once been pitched during that now infamous gala. The grass was still slightly worn from where chairs had stood. A few stray pebbles crunched beneath my feet as I knelt and placed my hand over the ground. Right here, they made me feel like nothing. Right here, they underestimated the wrong woman. And from right here, everything changed. I didn't know it then. But that moment, standing outside with a glass of water instead of champagne, with no seat and no speech, was the beginning of the end for who I used to be. The version of me that tolerated being overlooked, that bit her tongue so others wouldn't choke on the truth. The version of me who waited for love, for respect, for recognition. She didn't survive that night. And I don't mourn her. In her place stands someone who chooses herself without guilt, who leads without begging to be seen, who no longer needs a spotlight to shine. And I'll tell you something I learned the hard way. Sometimes you don't realize your power until someone tries to take it from you. Sometimes the insult they throw at you is actually the match that lights your revolution. Sometimes being exiled from the table isn't punishment, it's redirection, to build your own. To fill it with people who speak your name with care, not convenience. To make room for others who've also been told they don't belong. To pour into something that outlives the applause and the headlines. To craft not just a comeback, but a reinvention. So if you've been watching this story, maybe you're sitting in your own version of a hallway. Maybe you've been left off the list, passed over for promotion, told that you're too much, or not enough, or simply not the right fit. Maybe your voice shakes when you try to speak, because it's been ignored for so long. Here's what I want you to hear. What I need you to hear. You are not hard to love. You are not invisible. You are not the sum of someone else's projections. You are power waiting to be reclaimed. And when the world tries to reduce you, when it tells you to stay quiet or step aside, don't shrink. Don't apologize. Take up space. Ask questions. Speak louder. Burn bridges that lead to nowhere and build paths lined with people who truly see you. It won't be easy. It may cost you comfort, even relationships. But the reward? A life where you no longer wait for validation to know you matter. A legacy that doesn't just whisper your name in boardrooms, but echoes it in every life you touch. So if you're ready, if this story moved something inside you, reminded you of your worth, or lit that fire you've been dimming for too long, then join me. Follow this channel, subscribe. Be part of a community that doesn't just consume stories, but grows from them. Because we're just getting started, and I promise, the next chapter, it's going to be unforgettable.